Get on the show.
Call now.
888-640-9385. It's Sid Rosenberg on 640 Sports.
Hillary Clinton posted her announcement online. Her message, she wants to fight for the middle class as she tries once again to become the first female president.
Everyday Americans need a champion, and I want to be that champion.
In a sleek online video, Hillary Clinton announced her highly anticipated second bid for the White House.
I'm running for president.
Her strategy? Convincing voters she is the right person to address economic inequality and aims to court Democrats who've argued she's not progressive enough.
Americans have fought their way back from tough economic times, but the deck is still stacked in favor of those at the top.
The video stands in stark contrast to her online announcement in 2008.
I announced today that I'm forming a presidential exploratory committee.
Instead of an on-camera speech, this message is about the voter. Clinton doesn't appear until about halfway through the video. The emphasis is on sharing the stories of Americans of different ages, races, and sexual orientations.
I'm getting married this summer to someone I really care about.
It's a turnaround from her last campaign, which portrayed her as the inevitable nominee. Clinton quickly updated her social media pages today, trading in that well-known shot of her on BlackBerry with fresh images on Facebook and Twitter. Moments later, daughter Chelsea tweeted out, "Very proud of you, Mom." Last night, speaking from Panama, the president offered support to his former Secretary of State.
I think she would be an excellent president.
And Republicans launched a series of preemptive strikes, passing out Stop Hillary paraphernalia outside her headquarters in Brooklyn. And they released their own video jabs today.
Hillary Clinton represents the worst of the Washington machine, the arrogance of power, corruption, and cover-up.
We must do better than the Obama-Clinton foreign policy that has damaged relationships with our allies and emboldened our enemies.
Does America want a third Obama term? Or are we ready for strong conservative leadership to make America great again?
Everywhere is freaks and herrings, dykes and ferries. Tell me where is sanity? Tax the rich.
That's the big news. So we just did some NBA basketball with Glenn Rice. NHL superstar now at NBC, Jeremy Roenick, will join us next hour. NHL Stanley Cup playoffs get underway on Wednesday. Islanders and Capitals, my Rangers and Penguins on Thursday. Josh Rogan, CNN, will stop by. We'll do some baseball, all that good stuff too. But Hillary's the big news, and well, I don't know. I mean, this next guest is my guy. I love him, whether he's on Meet the Press or here. Of course, he was Barack Obama's very first ever White House press secretary. And he's one of those guys that even when you disagree with him, you still like him, which in this day and age is tough. Like when you and I go back and forth, I disagree with you. I think you're a dick, to be honest.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, but for some reason, Robert Gibbs, like I just love the guy. So here he is. Good morning, Robert. How are you?
Good morning, Sid. How are you?
Well, thank you. So the announcement comes out.
Yep.
I was talking to Chuck Todd about this on Friday, our good friend Chuck. Mm-hmm. And the way she did it, I asked him, and I'm going to ask you a lot of questions here, some out of ignorance and some because you can give a better answer. The way she did it, does it matter? He says, yeah, I think it does. I think, sometimes going out there and making that big deal, that big speech, I can tell you tends to help a lot of these candidates, but I think it's so in the bag for Hillary. Did it really even matter?
Well, I do think, I was thinking about this weekend, a lot of guys who run and announce. They have a big rally. They try to get their supporters. They get them excited, partly because they're not that well known with a broad swath of the American people, so they need the press attention for the announcement. And the truth is she just doesn't need it. And I think it also feeds into a culture narrative that they're trying to change within their campaign, one of humility, one of shelving the notion of inevitability. And so in that sense, it works for her. I think, though, the biggest thing that she's her biggest challenge, both in this announcement and now going forward, is to really talk passionately, not about the how or the if, but the why.
Why, yeah.
What you want to do, why you want to do it, what animates you, what motivates you, who you're going to take on, all those things. That, I think, is what, honestly, primary voters, especially in these early states, really, really want to hear.
I'll tell you what, whether I vote for her or not is immaterial. I mean, knowing me, I probably won't, but that's fine. The fact that her husband worked out of Harlem and she's working out of Brooklyn is very endearing to me.
Yep.
I do kind of like that. So I'm reading the New York Times or the New York Post and all these papers, and you know how these things go. They either love you or they hate you. Well, the New York Post, for some reason, Robert, can't stand her. So there's a lady named...
Who do they like?
I don't know. Nobody. You're right. Not A-Rod, not Phil Jackson, not anybody.
Yeah.
Maureen Callahan is the lady's name. And she writes, here's a breakdown of every scandal swirling around Hillary. Now, look, whether you like Hillary or not, and she's going to win her primary, there is some stuff in and around her that she needs to either explain or get by. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, no, look, every candidate, and she's certainly got them, every candidate's going to have things that need some explanation or need continual explanation. There's certainly no doubt about it. I don't know that I would say that everything that's swirling around her is a scandal, but again, I'm not a headline writer for the Post.
Right, of course not. But there are some things here that I'm going to... Now, you're going to play Hillary. That's your job today, Robert. You're going to play Hillary.
All right.
So if I say to you, I don't know, this foundation you started back in 2001, which was renamed the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation in 2013. This supposedly philanthropic effort. There's some concern about where the money ends up. They're saying it's a shady foundation. You would say what?
I would say look quite clearly at what the foundation has done and how it's improved lives throughout the world. I think that's what you'll hear them do and say and show the good works, in places like Africa and just really throughout the world that have gotten, tuberculosis or AIDS medicine, malaria drugs, all those types of things because of the hard work of the foundation in directing money into the field.
Fair enough. Then they talk about a spotty resume. As a U.S. Senator between 2001 to 2009, Robert, not one piece of legislation in Hillary's name, really not anything they can point to that says she did a very good job. And they also talk about the same thing in terms of Secretary of State. Yes, she did travel 12 countries and went here, went there, but no treaties. And really the only thing that came out of that was quite negative, which was Benghazi. So their contention is between her stay as senator in New York and Secretary of State. What did she really do?
Well, if that's the case, then let's just say if what the New York Post wrote is true, let's suspend our belief for a second that that's true.
Right.
Then tell me that must decimate 3/4 of the Republican field.
Well, that's true.
Ted Cruz has been in Washington for about 7 minutes.
Right.
I mean, I guess shutting down the government 3 times is a big resume.
Pretty impressive.
Builder.
Pretty impressive.
I mean, look, I think there's no doubt that she has a vast amount of experience. Again, it didn't necessarily work in her favor 8 years ago because it wasn't a time in which people were looking for experience. My hunch is this time people are looking in a much better and much more direct way for somebody who can make Washington work for people, right? For Obama, and when we were on that campaign, it was about changing the way it worked. Now it's going to be about getting it to work again. And I think it's going to require somebody, who knows a bit about Washington. And I think she's definitely got those credentials. And look, whether you disagree with her foreign policy or not, she is tough. She is smart. She's got all the experience that you would want in a commander-in-chief who has dealt with other countries, and I think that's going to be tremendously important as we move forward.
I agree with you, and I would say this. Forget about the right because they got their agenda. There are plenty of people, you know this, Robert, on the left that are not very impressed with Obama's foreign policy. Even the U.S.-Iran thing, I mean, Chuck Schumer to come out and blast it the way he did, that's not very good. I would think that Hillary here will distance herself, same party, but distance herself from Obama with a couple of things, including foreign policy. Agree or disagree?
Well, I think this is going to be what's interesting, and I talked about this in a New York Times story over the weekend. She's obviously part of the president's foreign policy for the first 4 years. So there are going to be things in which she's going to have to defend the administration on, quite frankly, because she was involved in those policies. But I think whether it's in foreign policy or domestic policy, I think she's going to have to find ways in which she differs with the president because that's just natural. And the truth is, she's not running for Barack Obama's third term. She's not running for Bill Clinton's third term. She's running for Hillary Clinton's first term. And I think it's important for her to show what she believes and what she stands for. And it will be interesting to watch her navigate how that works with the Obama White House, because if there's criticism of Barack Obama, how does that reflect on the Democratic base? What do they think about that? And so, again, that's going to be a little bit of a tricky thing for her to have to navigate over this time.
One of the things I thought about, Robert, this weekend was the name. Let's go with the name game here for a second, okay? No one's going to argue that the name Clinton is going to help Hillary here. I mean, if her name was Hillary Schwartz, she'd be nowhere near this thing. But having the same name as her husband, Bill, who was so popular, really helps her here. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, we are wondering whether or not the name Bush is going to kill Jeb. I mean, you can make an argument all day long that Jeb was a very good governor, and politically, he's much more prepared to be president than Clinton. But here's the problem. She's a Clinton, he's a Bush. How about that dynamic?
Well, I think there's no doubt. I mean, and I've been even surprised by this. I mean, you see these polls that ask Republican voters, or Republicans and independent-leaning Republicans, who would you be receptive to voting for, and who would you definitely not vote for? And I've been fairly surprised that the Bush number, even among Republicans, is quite high. Obviously, people have good feelings and remember 8 years of Clinton as 20+ million jobs. We actually ran a surplus for a couple of years and paid down part of the debt. There was, in some ways, relative stability in foreign policy, I think largely because you just didn't have really big things that were moving or happening during that time period. So I think she's going to find that as a big plus for her. Now, again, it's going to be tricky to navigate. She can't run for Bill Clinton's third term.
Right.
She's got to do some things differently. I mean, look, what's going to be interesting, and, Marco Rubio's announcing later today, and, the benefits that you have with Hillary Clinton is she's known by a number of people. She has a net positive rating. The downside is because people know you, it's hard to recast your image, right? For somebody like a Rubio, he's got kind of a blank slate. He's going to have a lot of time and a lot of energy is going to be spent coloring in that slate.
Yes.
The problem is, as you get to color in that slate because fewer people know you, you have other people that are trying and rushing to color in that slate as well. So each campaign and each candidate, because of how well they're known or not well known, it brings, a different thing that the campaign really has to work through over the course of that next 9 months.
Robert Gibbs, the Barack Obama's very first White House press secretary, again doing an amazing job with us here on the program. Hillary Clinton announcing that she's jumping in yesterday. We talked about everything from her experience to her husband. You talk about Marco Rubio jumping in today. Rand Paul was back with Chuck yesterday. First time I saw Rand Paul was with you. You were on the panel that day. Mm-hmm. And I really liked him. I mean, I don't know if I'd vote for him, but I really liked him. And I got to tell you, all those good feelings I had about Rand Paul went away yesterday. I thought he was contentious. When Chuck brought up his dad, he's like, well, what about your father? It's like, what do you mean my father? There was a completely different Rand Paul. Is that somebody already kind of under the pressure, not the same guy?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what they're trying to do here, Sid. This is, look, there's no doubt I've walked in every interview I've ever walked into as a staffer. I didn't like one or two of those questions. But you got to ask yourself whether, are you running for president to be president, or are you trying to prove a series of points about the process in which people get elected president? Because it hasn't changed a lot in the last 20 or so years. It's probably gotten crazier with the speed up of social media. And my thing is, you're either ready to answer these questions or you're there to try to change the way the whole thing is done. And I don't think there's a great track record for people getting elected in the latter. He seems prickly. Look, I also tend to believe that if I ask you what people seem like an honest, straightforward question and you don't answer it, my belief, I tend to believe you're trying to avoid answering the question for some reason.
Yes, agreed.
So
yeah.
I love that Chuck ended his, what did he end it with, welcome to the NFL or something at one point? Yeah. I mean, it's just, I mean, at some point, you gotta know that you're going to get asked these questions, and you got to have an answer. And you may not like every one of the questions, but boy, I tell you what, I've never seen a series of reporters. If all he's going to do is push back on people, I can assure you the only questions he's going to get asked are the things that set him off.
Right.
Because quite frankly, who isn't going to want their own tape of Rand Paul pulling off a microphone and leaving an interview? I mean, it just.
Right.
What I don't really get is it just seems so self-defeating. I don't really get. At some point, you're like, okay, you made your point, now move on, and he seems like he's not moving on. I mean, this isn't class president of the ninth grade.
Right.
This is the NFL. This is the major leagues. You got to step up and run for president the way everybody else has run for it, whether you like it or not.
Here's the thing, though. He has no chance. I know my cousin Norm Coleman, who I left Yale, he was on a couple of days ago. He loves him. He loves Lindsey. Neither one of those guys have a chance, okay? Ted doesn't have a chance. Rand doesn't have a chance. Now, Marco jumping in today, he's got a chance. But let's be honest. This is a billion-pound gorilla, this Hillary Clinton. Right now, it's so early. But Walker, Bush, these guys have a chance.
Yeah.
They do?
I think they do. I mean, look, here's the thing. First of all, two things I want to say in the answer to this question is, one, the first thing is we do not elect nominees particularly in national polling, okay? So for all of your listeners, when you hear these polls, USA Today does a national poll, and ABC does a national poll, and even NBC does national polls. National polls do not matter when you're running for president. Because you get elected the nominee and ultimately the president in a series of statewide contests. So how these guys are doing in Iowa, New Hampshire, in Virginia, Colorado, all of those places, that's really what matters, okay? That's what's truly important. But here's the one thing I would say to you that I think is interesting, and I said this to a group the other day, and I was quick to say I'm not predicting this, okay? This isn't a prediction. But since we instituted the 22nd Amendment in 1951, which makes sure that nobody can serve more than 2 terms, there's been exactly one time since 1951 where a party that held office for 8 years elected the next president for another 4 years to serve at least 12 consecutive years in the White House.
Right.
That happened exactly one time. It happened, as people will remember, in 1988 with George H.W. Bush after 8 years of Ronald Reagan. It didn't happen 4 other times when we had, in sometimes popular and sometimes less popular presidents. You mentioned Bill Clinton's popularity. In 2000, he was in the 60s in his approval rating, or at least in the high 50s, and Al Gore, while some people in Florida will still dispute whether he won or lost Florida, he doesn't win that race. So it is not an easy thing after 8 years of one-party rule to elect another person from that party to the White House. So if I'm a Republican, it's one of the things I would hang my hat on.
Awesome. Robert Gibbs, that's great stuff. Now, about 2 minutes to go. Tell me this. Back to Hillary for a second here. Is there anybody you can see popping up over the next couple of months or so that may offer her some resistance in her own party? Anybody?
Not a ton. I mean, you see. Look, I certainly take Elizabeth Warren at her word that she's not going to run. I think if you say you're not going to run for president about 120 times, right, people should start believing.
Well, hold on. Well, Nick Saban told us he wasn't going to Alabama, and then he left Miami anyway.
Don't even get me started on Nick Saban, Sid. You said we only had 2 minutes left, and as an Auburn fan, I'd be required to filibuster for the next.
I'm sure.
Trust me, I wish he'd have stayed in Miami. But I think that, look, I don't see anybody that's gonna beat her. I assume at this point that because the president is saying what he's saying, that the vice president obviously is not going to run. I will say this, when she's driving out to Iowa, then she's going to visit New Hampshire. See, these people, and I think the American people should really take heart in this, they take their jobs immensely seriously when it comes to picking their nominees in the caucus and the primary in these first two states. They want to put them through the paces. And what they're going to want to see Hillary do, as I said the other day, they're going to want her to get this nomination the old-fashioned way. They want to see her earn it.
Right,
okay?
right.
So they will put her through her paces, and she's going to have to be on her game. I think one of the things that she sort of assumed last time she was running against, it was sort of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and the truth is she just wasn't that well positioned. She wasn't humble. She didn't work as hard at it as she needed to, and the campaign didn't put her in the best circumstances. And I think now they're very, very much trying to change that. And I think primary voters are going to want to see her really work and earn their support and trust.
I would hope this. I would hope that people are informed. I know that there was plenty of African-American folks who voted for Barack Obama, had no idea what he thought, what the issues were. Hey, I'm black, you're black, I'm voting for you. And my fear is gender will do the same thing here. There are Republican ladies right now that secretly will vote for Hillary because they love the idea of a woman in the White House. It's just, I know what's going to happen, and I just don't see people being elected based upon color or gender or any of that type of thing. And Hillary does have that going for her. You can't argue that.
No, she certainly does. I will say this: I've worked for female candidates before, and I've watched focus groups. Sometimes the toughest people on female candidates are other females. So again, I think the one thing about this process is it really does put people through their paces. I mean, again, we just talked about it with Rand Paul. I mean, the question is, after a week, you wonder, is this guy really ready to do this? Does he really want to be doing this? And this process really, it puts you through the ringer and it spits you out the other side. And it's not necessarily indicative of what you're going to face when you get in the White House. But my God, if you can't run a campaign, you can't run the country.
Fair enough.
And so you're going to get put through the paces, and she's going to have good days and she's going to have bad days, but she's going to have to get out there and earn it.
Oh, you're wonderful. I love you. Thank you again for coming on. And I meant what I said when I first brought you on, Robert, in that when you make your points, and you're the same way on TV, it's never annoying. It's never contentious. You've got an opinion, which, by the way, is well-informed, more informed than most. And the way you present it really is wonderful. So thank you. I'm glad we're friends.
Well,
I'm glad you came on.
I greatly appreciate it, Sid. I always enjoy calling in. And now I know, though, I've got you to blame for Nick Saban in Tuscaloosa.
That's all me. You're right. So don't hold that against me, Gibbs. I know you're a big Auburn guy. Once again, an excellent job by Robert Gibbs. So a pretty good run here. Started with former New York cop, Glenn Beck favorite John Cardillo. Then we had Glenn Rice. Glenn Rice basketball camps open up today. Go to Glenn at glennricebasketball.com or at glennrice41 on the Twitter. And then former Barack Obama White House press secretary Robert Gibbs. We'll take a short break. When we get back, this is big, starting today and each and every Monday at this time, the legendary Hank Goldberg right here on the Sid Rosenberg Show. And we've got Hank right after this.
Now, more Sid Rosenberg on 640 Sports.
2 balls, 2 strikes. Beckham swings and laces one to center. Ichiro racing back, still going back. It's over his head, all the way to the wall, in the next county in center field. Rounding third is Jennings on his way home. He'll score. Beckham diving into third with a triple, and the Rays lead us 5-2. 2-2. Here comes. Swinging a fly ball, well hit into left field. Yelich racing back to the track. It's off his glove and dives on the warning track and rolls to the wall. Beckham scores. Rivera to second, and the Rays lead is 6-2. Ground ball to second base. This should do it. Beckham down to get it. He throws to first, and the Rays have defeated the Marlins and win the series here in Miami. The Rays spotted the Marlins the game on Friday, come back and win Saturday and Sunday, defeating them today by the final score of 8-5.
No doubt disappointing. We haven't played well really all week, and today a couple of big blows injury-wise, and I'm really disappointed, but we got to bounce back, and we got another game tomorrow night in Atlanta. Hopefully we're a better road team than we have been a home team, and we gotta dig deep right now, to see what we're made of.
Come on now.
Kiss me, babe. You like the Doors?
Yeah, I like the Doors.
Yeah. You smoked a lot of weed to this stuff in high school, didn't you?
Nah, how dare you?
Hollywood Hills, breaking out the blue light, little Pink Floyd, little Doors.
Irresponsibly.
What was that promise that you made? Who was that? Val Kilmer did a great job as Morrison in this movie. Not a good job, a great job. Right up there with Philip Seymour Hoffman's portrayal of Truman Capote, and not even go with Jamie Foxx as Ray Charles. 888-640-9385. Great run of guests there. John Cardillo, former New York City cop, now a Glenn Beck favorite, talking about the issues with the Department of Justice. They like hookers. Then we spoke to Glenn Rice. Glenn Rice's basketball camp starts today for the next 2 weeks, and as the Miami Heat are just about done. And then we just spent 20 minutes with the former White House press secretary, the very first ever for Barack Obama, and now a star on Meet the Press, our good friend Robert Gibbs. Josh Rogan, CNN, will be here next hour, as well as Jeremy Roenick. The NHL Stanley Cup playoffs start Wednesday. Z-Max Islanders taking on the Capitals on Wednesday, and my New York Hockey Rangers taking on the Penguins on Thursday. So a lot of great guests coming your way, but we're really excited about this. And I say this all the time. The three greatest sports talk hosts in the history of our business, don't even Levitard, these guys are nothing. Mike Francesa, Chris Russo, and Hank Goldberg. Hank is a treasure. He's the best sports talk show host here ever in South Florida. He's been doing a great show for us, brought to you by Gulfstream Park every Saturday. Tom Jicha, Troy Stratford, a host of others. And now, this is amazing, we get Hank every Monday. Huh? How good is this? How good is this?
We have to thank Gulfstream.
No,
yeah, right.
Thank Hank. So here he is, my man, the legendary Hank Goldberg. Good morning, Hank.
I got 40,000 tons of stick coming up from Havana. What line is that movie from?
That would be The Godfather.
Tequila Sunrise.
Oh, excuse me. That's a nice job. You know, the last time you were on, you quoted Richard Gere in American Gigolo.
Yeah, that shows I have no life whatsoever.
Well, I'm really thrilled you're going to be here every Monday, Hank. It's a big deal for me. I was a guest of yours, you and Troy, on Saturday, which was a heck of a lot of fun. We brought you in with the Marlins sound. We did some baseball on Saturday, you and I, and all these great expectations. And you're a great baseball guy. I don't know if everybody knows this, but Hank's dad worked for the Yankees for many, many years. All these great expectations and all the money they spent, and it's real early, but 1-5. What is that all about?
Yeah, I was driving someplace yesterday, and I was listening to the Marlins game, and the play-by-play guy was talking about days when he worked with Duke Snyder. And Duke Snyder said after, I guess, the team they were broadcasting for, I got off to a slow start, and he made the comment, somebody's going to pay. And he said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, back in the days when he played for the Dodgers and they got off to a slow start, I guess it was, I don't know if it was Walter Alston, who was the manager at the time, said, somebody's going to pay. And he was talking to the players, and somebody was going to be getting dealt away or whatever. But he didn't really fully explain who he meant when he said somebody's going to pay.
Right.
I mean,
he may have meant the competition. I mean, the Dodgers only beat the Yankees once in 55. You know this, Hank, but they were in the World Series against the Yankees every year. So he may have meant either A, the competition, or somebody inside the organization, which brings up the name Mike Redmond here.
Well, I think it was at a time when the Dodgers had moved west, and I think they started dumping some players, but somebody's going to pay. I mean, what, are they talking about Redmond? Or who's he referring to? But the home run king has not delivered yet. They had their first home run in 6 games yesterday, but it was fruitless. It was late in the game, and it really didn't mean much. And now they're going to Atlanta, and Atlanta is off to a red hot start.
Yeah.
So they can't count on bouncing back right away, I don't think. And the irony is, Freddie Gonzalez, their old manager, is doing very well in Atlanta right now.
He is. The Mets actually beat the Braves yesterday. The Braves were trying to join the Tigers and the Royals as the only unbeaten so far. You know, I had Christopher Mad Dog Russo on the show last week, Hank, and he does a great sports show, but he also does a baseball show on the Baseball Network. He knows his stuff. And he said, listen, you got to come down with the Marlins. Fernandez is not back yet. I don't trust Henderson Alvarez, who, by the way, was terrible yesterday and now needs an MRI. He goes, I don't like Matt Latos. Last time Latos pitched, he gave up 7 runs in the first inning against Atlanta. He pitches today. He basically said, you need to slow down with the Marlins because their pitching is not that good. And by the way, at least 6 games in, that's been the case.
Yesterday, Bill Madden's column in the Daily News had a whole paragraph about their catching woes.
Right.
So they really need to bring up their young catcher now and not rely on Salty, who had a big, had a big game when they scored 10 runs in their 1 win.
Right. Do you, look, and your dad worked for the Yanks all those years.
Well, he didn't work for him.
He covered him, right.
Yeah,
So are you, I know you live here forever now, so you're a South Florida guy, so you almost have to, Hank, root for the local teams, but are you really a Marlin fan at heart or a Yankee fan?
I'm not a Marlin fan.
Is it because of the ownership group or just, why is that?
Well, I was I'm trying to remember if I ever was a Marlin fan.
Oh, 97. Come on. Boog, they're winning a World Series. You had to love them in 97.
Yeah, I like that team.
Yeah.
But then they broke them up so fast
that
it was hard to stay a Marlin fan because of the turnover. And when Jeff was the manager, I used to play ball with Jeff. So in the Maplewood Twilight League, that was back in my Jersey days.
The great Jeff Torborg.
Yeah, and Jeff and I were pretty good friends, so I was rooting for him then, and Jeff got kind of a raw deal here. So, it's hard. It was, and when they were an expansion team, I was, I'll never forget the first baseball game that was played here, their opening day. Eddie Kaplan and I were sitting in the football press box with Mike Schmidt, just the 3 of us.
Wow.
And you can ask Eddie. That was one of the big thrills of our lives.
Yeah.
To sit there and watch a game with Mike Schmidt.
That's pretty awesome. You know what that reminds me of? When I came to work down here, Hank, and I first started working in sports. The year was 1997. I was working for Mike Levy at Sportsline USA, which is now CBSSports.com. That's where I met Scott Kaplan, and we started our career. Well, the guys that helped Mike Levy start that company outside of the nameless venture capitalists were Joe Namath and Mike Schmidt. So we'd have these big events, and Namath and Schmidt would be at every party. And I was the same way. I was like, oh, and I'm a Met fan, but oh my God, Namath and Schmidt?
Well, I was I had stayed a Yankee fan when I came down here because I had a lot of ties there to the Yankee history, and the Marlins' history was bought and paid for that big pennant race that they had, or that big championship, the last one they had. But I really enjoyed that because they had some great ball players there and some really good guys.
I mean, Huizenga wanted to prove a point. Huizenga was like, look, I can do what Steinbrenner did. I can buy a championship. And he did it in 97.
Yeah. And they had people like Mike Lowe on that team. Mike Lowe was a great guy. And, I had I knew a lot of the players on that team. I got to know a lot of the players on that team. Yeah. And I rooted for them. But they were soon gone. And then I really didn't like what this ownership did and the way they came in, the way they were brought in, and I did not like the previous owner at all.
Right.
He was a hard guy to like.
Right. So what ownership do you like less than? And I'm not saying you dislike Ross or Tannenbaum and those guys. I just mean the way they operate, the way things have gone. The Marlins or the Dolphins, who you've been very critical of.
Well, I don't like the way the Dolphins are structured right now, and they got rid of a lot of good people. And I think Parcells saw what it was, and he got out of here. And it just and I'm hopeful that Tannenbaum can turn it around.
You know, it's funny. Listen, I love Bill, too. I'm a Giant fan. He won me 2 Super Bowls. And I remember the day they announced, Hank, that Bill was coming. I was still working for 790. I went on Dan Le Batard's show. He's like, oh, please, he hasn't done much in Dallas. And I'm like, you're getting a great football guy. And he came here. And the first year, they got Chad Pennington. He fell into Miami's lap because Favre went to the Jets, and we made the playoffs. But after that, it was years and years of bad to mediocre football, Sperano, Ireland. So you look back, Parcells' stay here was not exactly Hall of Fame material. What do you think he really did here, Bill Parcells?
I think that Bill was never. I thought that Bill's tenure here was started off okay, like you said, and then when the ownership changed, Bill didn't like the way it was structured, and he got out, and he wasn't into it that last year at all. But I think Bill didn't do well here for whatever reason. It was just, and his hires were terrible.
Yeah. So the way the organization is structured now, Hank, with Donna Ponte and the trouble she's in.
He saw it coming.
Yeah, he knew it. He saw it coming. And now, what happens going forward? Do you think a guy like Tannenbaum can do some good things here, or do you believe in and around him, the Apontes, the Philbins, even Steve Ross, that it's going to be very difficult for anybody to do well here?
I think the ownership is clueless, and I don't think it's you go back and you look at where his priorities were, starting with the whole red carpet deal. It was a joke. The phony ownership. None of those people were real owners, and that was where his priority was, to publicize that. And then, the whole thing has, even the way they went about getting sued, I think that was a statement, because he wanted to be the guy who paid the most money for a defensive player to keep up with, he wanted, it was like a real estate deal to him.
Right.
And the guy's a great player, don't misunderstand me. But they have to fill in the other holes, or it's not going to mean that much.
What you said on Saturday, Hank, I swear I'm still laughing. For you folks that don't know, the Dolphins need a wide receiver. So they brought in 3 veteran wide receivers last week, Jennings, Michael Crabtree, and Wes Welker. And you, me, and Troy Stratford, who was very good. We're going back and forth about Wes, and you and I were in agreement. He doesn't seem like the right guy. And the last thing you said was, it would be nice if the Dolphins had a guy who can, quote-unquote, find his way to the ballpark.
Walker makes no sense from the standpoint that, Troy's saying that he can tutor the other guys. Well, he's not very brought in as a coach.
Right.
You need a guy who can play, and who's available.
Right. Those guys are good. When you have a really good football team and a good wide receiving core, and you want to bring in a veteran to help in the locker room, that's one thing. They need guys to produce, right?
Yeah. And I'd rather see him bring in one of the other 2 guys who they brought in for interviews, who apparently, I like what they've done with Pouncey. They got to keep a guy like that around, but they still haven't fixed the holes at linebacker, and the cornerback situation is still questionable. The offensive line situation beyond Pouncey and the left tackle's coming back off injury. They have question marks there. They're far from a playoff contender right now. And what do you do with the quarterback? To sign him to a 5-year deal, I think, would be a big mistake.
I don't think they will. So then tell me, what do the Dolphins do if you were in that war room with Tannenbaum, Hank? And he probably wishes you were, and maybe you can.
I don't think so.
Now, Mike loves you. What do you think the Dolphins should and/or will do?
Well, I think they're going to probably draft a running back.
They need one outside Lamar Miller. What else do they have?
Yeah, and there's some good ones there, and that's where they'll go early, and they'll fill the other holes where I'm talking about. So
yeah.
Back to the Marlins for now. What's up with Stanton? He hasn't hit a home run yet.
Well, it's only 6 games, but I don't think he's seeing a lot of really good pitches. I hate to say this because we were all yelling and screaming about this unbelievable lineup around him and Yelich and Ozuna, and I don't think opposing pitchers are scared. I really don't. Not yet. Do you?
And I think the other guys can't hit the long ball in that. You got to be exceptional to hit the long ball in that stadium.
Well, we'll see. They go to Atlanta, and you're right. The Braves came here and swept the Marlins last week, and outside the loss for the Mets yesterday, they were perfect up until yesterday. But we'll see if the Marlins can get them a bid here. Are you depressed, Hank? 2 regular season games to go. The writing is on the wall. 2 back of Indiana and Brooklyn. 1 Heat loss, 1 win from one of those teams. And after 4 consecutive years of going to the NBA Finals and winning 2 championships, it looks like the Heat are not even going to make the playoffs. Your thoughts?
Well, there were 3 games that they lost by 16, by 15, and by 19 points, where they blew leads of that margin in the second half.
That's right.
If they had won those games, they'd be sitting in 7th place right now, and they'd be a shoo-in to make the playoffs.
I'm glad you said that. Even Saturday, by the way, they didn't have a double-digit lead like they blew against Dallas, Golden State, Milwaukee, Detroit, and Chicago, but they had the lead over Toronto late, lost that game. So with everybody talking about injuries, that's one thing. Truth is, if the Heat held on to leads in the second half, they could be a 6 seed.
Yeah, and, I'm tired of hearing excuses around this town.
Yeah.
You've got the Dolphins had excuses. Well, what's the Canes' excuses? By the way, I spent an afternoon with Mike Shula last week. I go to the racetrack, I think, as I've told you before, once a month with Greasy and Coach Shula, Coach Don Shula, and Mike was in town, and he came with us last Wednesday. And you listen to Mike. He's ready to be a head coach again. He's the offensive coordinator in Carolina. Listen to him talk. Boy, would he be a natural at the University of Miami. Bring back the Shula name of this town. He'd be the right guy.
I love it. So you want to just fire Golden today? We can make it happen. I'm sure we can make a call.
What's the hurry? You've got you got 7 guys about to be drafted from that team, from that 6 and 7 team. Mike would be the ideal guy. He really would. And if they're going to make the change, he would be my number 1 candidate. And I think the town would go crazy over it. They would sell tickets. And he would be the guy to restore. He did a good job at Alabama.
Yes, he did. Well, the problem was he just won there. Then Nick came in and won it all.
Yeah.
I mean, Nick is so damn good. Listen, 2 more that you want. This can change next week, Hank. But right now, talking about Mike Shula, we know the Hurricanes are mediocre, and they've been mediocre forever. The Dolphins are mediocre at best.
They're both members of the 500 Club.
That's right. The Panthers didn't make.
I'm talking about Skinny D'Amato's place in Atlantic City.
I know that place. The Panthers didn't make the playoffs again. The Heat are about to not make the playoffs, and the Marlins are 1-5. Things are great, aren't they?
Oh yeah. Maybe it goes back to the comment I heard on the radio. Somebody's got to pay.
Yeah, that's right. Everybody start firing somebody in every spot this morning. Now look, big fight coming up. Pacquiao Mayweather. Now, I've been told, Hank, that you don't mind every now and then placing a small wager on certain events. And of course,
except that one.
Who do you like in that one?
I like it to go the distance. That's going to be my bet.
And what is that? What's the money for that? What's the line for that?
It's 11-10.
Really? To go the distance?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to knock him out either, Mayweather. I had a guy on last week who's going to the Hall of Fame this summer, the Boxing Hall of Fame, Nigel Collins, who gives Pacquiao a legitimate shot.
Oh, well, that's where the money's going. It opened up. I think I talked to guys in Las Vegas who run the sports books there, who tell me that all the money that's come in so far is coming on Pacquiao. They expect it to balance out somewhat, but the prices drop.
Yeah. A last one then. Listen, we'll do this every Monday. This is a big honor for me, Hank. You know that. Brought to you by Gulfstream Park. The Kentucky Derby right around the corner. So what's early on here? The early Hank pick is who?
Well, I saw American Pharoah win the big stakes race at Oaklawn, and Bob Baffert says he's the best 3-year-old he's ever had. Of course, he has Dortmund, too, and right now he's holding the cards. Those horses look like they're going to run 1-2, but don't rule out Frosted, who won the Woodman Memorial, who looks like he's the one horse who can come from behind. The other ones could knock each other off.
Right. But I'd love to see Baffert back in the winner's circle, though. It's been a long time.
By the way, all-time remark on the Masters. One of the announcers called Spaeth a credit to the game. Do you think he's a little young to be a credit to the game?
Did he really?
Yeah. He also said, or one of the other ones said, that Well, they're not really athletes.
Oh, no.
I mean, I heard some ridiculous comments yesterday, but that was quite an achievement what he did.
That wasn't our guy Jim Nance. Couldn't have been Jimmy.
No, it wasn't Jimmy.
You know what's funny about Jimmy, and I'll let you run with this. When I first started in this business, Hank, and I always say this, you were always very, very kind to me and Scott and offered us a lot of positive reinforcement. And early in my career, one of the things I did every single year was Scott and I did our show from Bob Fishman's golf tournament in Broken Sound for the Bone Marrow. And I remember Jim Nance would always host the event. You would always be there, and Paul Horning, and a bunch of other mainstays every single year. Sandy Koufax, that was a great event.
Oh, yeah, I got to play with Koufax.
Oh, you did?
Incredible, yeah.
How was that?
Oh, I just kept staring at his left arm the whole time.
That is great. Hey, I'm thrilled to death of doing this every Monday. It's a big honor, and I love you, and thank you. I'm excited about this.
Hey, Sidney, I'm honored. You know, you're the one guy. Somebody asked me about you the other day. I said, let me tell you something about Sid. He's fun. He's always prepared, and he works at it. And it's no accident that he's the best guy on the air right now. So the honor is mine as much as it is yours.
Thank you, Hank. Thank you. There he is. That's very nice. Thank you, Hank. Coming from you, that means a lot. The great Hank Goldberg, and he's going to be with us each and every Monday at 8:30 a.m. Brought to you by our good friends at Gulfstream Park. Thank you, Hank. 888-640-9385. Back with the 9 o'clock hour right after this.